I'm Samantha Mitchell, 22 years old, and my father just gave me an ultimatum that made my blood boil. Attend Natalie's wedding or kiss your tuition goodbye. My golden child sister, the same one who stole my boyfriend in high school and never apologized, is getting married in 3 weeks. The invitation sits on my table like a ticking bomb. Dad's words echo in my head. Family obligations come first, Sam. But after what Natalie did to me, can I really force myself to smile through her perfect day? If I refuse, my entire future hangs in the balance. Before I dive into this mess, let me know where you're watching from in the comments. Hit that like button and subscribe if you've ever dealt with family drama that makes your stomach twist into knots. Trust me, this story is going to take you on an emotional roller coaster you won't want to miss. Growing up in the Mitchell household meant living in Natalie's shadow. From day one, my sister was destined for greatness, at least according to our parents. Howard and Diane Mitchell created the perfect little suburban life in our Connecticut neighborhood, with Dad climbing the corporate ladder at his investment firm and Mom dedicated to maintaining our family's social standing. Our brick colonial house with its manicured lawn was the physical manifestation of the image they worked so hard to project. Natalie, 3 years my senior, fit perfectly into this carefully crafted picture. With her straight-A report cards, impressive violin recitals, and effortless popularity, she was everything my parents dreamed of. Even at 27, she still maintains that polished perfection, designer clothes, executive position at a marketing firm, and now an engagement to James Wilson, heir to a real estate development company. I still remember my 10th birthday party. Mom had planned a modest gathering with a few friends from school, nothing extravagant. Halfway through the celebration, Natalie came home from a debate tournament with yet another first-place trophy. Within minutes, my birthday was forgotten as my parents fawned over her achievement. "Look at our brilliant Natalie," Dad boasted, champagne flute in hand, a drink he'd opened to celebrate her win, not my birthday. My friends awkwardly ate cake while my parents made toast after toast to Natalie's success. I retreated to my room before they even noticed I was gone. That pattern repeated throughout our childhood. When I brought home B+ grades, Dad would sigh and say, "Natalie never struggled with chemistry." When I joined the art club instead of debate team, Mom wondered aloud, "Couldn't you try something more substantial? Like your sister?" Even my personal style became a point of contention. My vintage clothes and creative accessories were deemed odd compared to Natalie's preppy, conventional attire. The dynamic shifted but intensified when our parents divorced during my freshman year of high school. Dad moved into a luxury apartment downtown while Mom kept the family home. The custody arrangement had us alternating weekends, but Natalie, already 17, mostly stayed with Mom where she could maintain her social life. During those awkward weekends at Dad's apartment, he'd spend half the time talking about Natalie's college applications and how prestigious her potential schools were. After the divorce, Dad became even more fixated on success and status, perhaps to prove something to Mom, or maybe to himself. His expectations for Natalie grew, and she rose to meet them. Meanwhile, I became even more of an afterthought. When it came time for my college applications, I braced myself for the battle. Unlike Natalie, who dutifully applied to Ivy League business programs, I set my sights on Westbrook College of Arts. Dad's reaction was exactly what I expected. "Art school?" He practically spat the words across the dinner table. "What kind of career plan is that, Samantha? Do you want to be struggling to pay rent for the rest of your life?" Despite his opposition, I stood firm. Those application essays were the first time I truly felt I was creating my own path. When the acceptance letter arrived, I felt a surge of pride that quickly deflated when Dad announced his conditions. "Fine. I'll pay your tuition," he said, lips tight with disapproval. "But the moment your grades slip or you start acting irresponsibly, the money stops. Understand? I'm not funding some bohemian fantasy." For 3 years, I've lived with that threat hanging over my head. Every semester, I send him my transcript. Every holiday gathering, I endure his subtle digs about real careers and wasting potential. but I've maintained my 3.8 GPA and even started selling some of my work at local galleries. Not that he's ever attended a showing. Meanwhile, Natalie's life continued its perfect trajectory. After graduating with honors from Yale, she landed a job at a top marketing firm, met James at a charity gala, and now sports a 4-carat diamond engagement ring. The wedding plans have consumed family conversations for months. Exclusive venue, gourmet menu, designer dress. Mom calls me weekly with updates I never asked for, while Dad reminds me how connections at this wedding could help my future if I would just make an effort. What neither of them seems to remember or care about is why I can barely stand to be in the same room as my sister. Some betrayals cut too deep to be papered over with wedding invitations and family obligations. And Natalie's betrayal changed the course of my life forever. Senior year of high school should have been my time to shine. After years of feeling invisible in my own family, I'd finally found my place with the creative crowd and, most importantly, with Kyle Brennan. We met in advanced art class junior year. He was the photography whiz to my painting passion. With his thoughtful blue eyes and quiet confidence, Kyle saw me in a way no one else ever had. He noticed details about my artwork that even my teachers missed. He valued my opinions and encouraged my wildest creative ideas. For the first time, I felt truly understood. We'd spend weekends in the local art museum, critiquing exhibitions and dreaming about our futures. Kyle wanted to study photojournalism, to tell stories that changed how people saw the world. I shared my dream of creating immersive art installations that transformed spaces and emotions. We planned to apply to schools in the same cities, to build our creative lives together. "You see things differently, Sam," he told me one night as we lay on the hood of his car, watching stars appear in the autumn sky. "It's like you have this direct line to what really matters in life, beyond all the surface stuff everyone else chases." For a girl who'd grown up feeling perpetually inadequate, his words were water in a desert. Kyle became my safe harbor, the person who made me believe my different perspective was a strength, not a deficiency. I should have known it was too good to last. Natalie had always been politely disinterested in my life, treating my friends and interests with benign neglect. But something changed that fall. She started appearing whenever Kyle came over, asking questions about his photography, laughing at his jokes. I noticed, but dismissed the warning bells in my head. Surely my perfect sister, with her college boyfriend and sophisticated social circle, couldn't possibly be interested in my artistic, somewhat nerdy boyfriend. I was wrong. Jessica Meyer's Halloween party marked the beginning of the end. I'd gone as Frida Kahlo, with an elaborate flower crown I'd spent days crafting. Kyle was shooting photos for the yearbook, planning to join me after he captured enough party moments. Natalie had her own college party to attend, but mysteriously changed plans last minute. Around midnight, when Kyle hadn't found me yet, I went looking for him. The Myers house was huge, with multiple rooms filled with costumed classmates. I checked the kitchen, the den, even the backyard. Finally, I headed upstairs to check if he was taking aerial shots from the balcony, something he'd mentioned wanting to try. I found him. Not on the balcony, but in the guest bedroom. With Natalie. Her Cleopatra costume half removed, his hands tangled in her hair, locked in a kiss that told me this wasn't their first. The moment crystallized in my memory like one of Kyle's photographs, every detail sharp and permanent. The silver moonlight streaming through the window. The abandoned camera on the nightstand. The smudge of my sister's lipstick on his mouth. The split second of shock on their faces before shock transformed to guilt. Sam, Kyle scrambled away from Natalie. "This isn't." I can explain. But there was nothing to explain. The betrayal was written in every line of their bodies, in the intimate familiarity they clearly shared. Natalie recovered first, smoothing her costume with practiced composure. "Sam, don't overreact. These things happen. Chemistry isn't something you can control." Chemistry. As if my pain could be reduced to a scientific formula. As if betrayal by the two people who should have protected my heart was just an unfortunate chemical reaction. I fled the party, ignoring Kyle's calls and texts for days afterward. When he finally cornered me at school, his excuses made everything worse. She pursued me, Sam. She just kept showing up, saying she wanted to understand photography to connect with you better. He ran his hands through his hair, eyes pleading. You know how persuasive she can be. How do you say no to someone like Natalie? The pathetic justification revealed everything. He saw Natalie the same way everyone else did. As irresistible. As superior. As someone whose desires mattered more than promises or loyalty or my heart. The family fallout was even more devastating than losing Kyle. When my parents found out, through the high school gossip mill rather than from either Natalie or me, their reaction stunned me. You're making this into a bigger deal than it needs to be, Mom said over breakfast, not even looking up from her tablet. Teenage relationships rarely last anyway. Dad was even worse. Frankly, Sam, Kyle seems like a young man with ambition. Can you blame him for being drawn to someone who shares his drive for success? The message was clear. Of course someone would choose Natalie over me. It was the natural order of things in their eyes. Natalie herself never offered a genuine apology. Instead, she gave me a wide berth for a few weeks before approaching me with a rehearsed speech about hoping we could move past this awkwardness. No acknowledgement of the trust she'd shattered. No recognition of the line she crossed. After that, I withdrew completely. I poured all my pain and betrayal into my art, creating a series of mixed media pieces my teacher called startlingly mature and emotionally complex. I stopped sharing anything personal with my family. I built walls around my heart and let only a select few behind them. My art portfolio, fueled by that pain, ultimately helped secure my place at Westbrook. In some twisted way, Natalie's betrayal had pushed my work to a new level. But the scars remained. Trust didn't come easily anymore. The little confidence I'd built with Kyle crumbled, leaving me questioning my worth all over again. Most painfully, any illusion that my sister cared about my feelings was permanently shattered. We maintained a civil facade at family gatherings, but the sisterly bond was broken beyond repair. Or so I thought until that cream-colored wedding invitation arrived, demanding my presence at the joyous union of Natalie Mitchell and James Wilson, as if the past could be erased with engraved cardstock and promises of champagne toasts. The invitation arrived on a Tuesday in March, an oversized cream envelope with gold calligraphy that screamed expensive before I even opened it. Inside was not just an invitation, but an entire package. The formal card on heavyweight paper, a details card for the wedding weekend itinerary, a response card with its own addressed envelope, and a small watercolor map of the Hamptons venue. A handwritten note from Natalie was tucked inside. Really hoping you'll be part of our special day, sis. XOXO. The audacity took my breath away. The wedding was scheduled for Memorial Day weekend at some exclusive oceanfront estate. 3 days of scheduled activities including a welcome dinner, spa morning, rehearsal dinner, and farewell brunch. All perfectly designed for maximum social media impact, no doubt. I tossed the entire package into my kitchen drawer and tried to forget about it. My final year of college was in full swing, with my senior art exhibition to prepare for and graduation on the horizon. I had no intention of watching Natalie play princess for a weekend, pretending we had some kind of loving sisterly bond. When Dad called inviting me to dinner the following week, I should have suspected something was up. He rarely arranged one-on-one dinners unless he had an agenda. But I agreed, thinking maybe he wanted to discuss my post-graduation plans. Giovanni's was his favorite Italian restaurant downtown, white tablecloths, soft lighting, and prices that made my student budget wince. He was already seated when I arrived, Manhattan in hand, reviewing something on his phone with that focused frown I'd come to associate with business matters. Samantha, he stood briefly as I approached, offering a quick cheek kiss before resuming his seat. You look thin. Are you eating properly? No, how are you, or how's your artwork going? Just straight to criticism disguised as concern. Classic Howard Mitchell. I'm fine, Dad. Just busy with final projects. I signaled the waiter for a glass of house red, knowing Dad would disapprove of the economical choice, but unwilling to let him shame me into ordering something pricier. Dinner progressed with his usual questions about classes and grades, followed by not-so-subtle inquiries about my employment prospects after graduation. I outlined my plan to work at a local gallery while continuing to build my portfolio, information I'd shared at least 3 times before. It wasn't until the tiramisu arrived that he finally revealed his true purpose. So, he dabbed his mouth with the linen napkin. Natalie tells me you haven't RSVP'd to the wedding yet. I focused on my dessert. I'm not planning to attend. The temperature at the table seemed to drop 10 degrees. That's not acceptable, Samantha. His voice took on the clipped tone he used when an investment wasn't performing to his standards. This is your sister's wedding. Your absence would be noticed and remarked upon. By who? Your country club friends who barely know I exist. I tried to keep my voice level. Natalie and I aren't close, Dad. She knows why. This again. He set down his espresso cup with a sharp click. That high school drama was years ago. Grown adults don't hold grudges over teenage relationships. It wasn't about the boy, Dad. Though partly it was. It was about trust and respect, which Natalie has never shown me. Respect is earned, Samantha. The familiar refrain. Natalie has worked hard to build a successful life. James comes from an excellent family with significant connections. This wedding will have people there who could help your artistic pursuits if you'd make the effort to network properly. I pushed my plate away, appetite gone. I'm not going to pretend everything's fine between us just for appearances. I have finals that week anyway. His expression hardened. The wedding is after finals and you know it. I've been patient with your art school choice, Samantha. I've paid your tuition without complaint. Without complaint? I couldn't help the bitter laugh. You've held it over my head for 3 years. Because I'm investing in your future. His voice rose enough that nearby diners glanced our way. He noticed and immediately modulated his tone back to a controlled intensity. And I expect certain things in return. Family obligations being chief among them. The threat hung unspoken between us, but I pushed anyway. Or what? Or I'll reconsider my financial support for your final semester. His eyes were cold, calculating. You're an adult making choices, Samantha. Adults face consequences for their choices. The room seemed to tilt slightly. My final semester, the most important one, with my degree exhibition that could make or break my entry into the art world. Without his tuition payment, I'd have to take out last-minute loans, possibly delay graduation, miss exhibition opportunities. You'd really do that? I whispered. Hold my education hostage over a wedding? I prefer to think of it as teaching you about priorities. He signaled for the check. Family comes first, Samantha. It's time you learned that. RSVP by the end of the week, and I expect you to be polite and engaged throughout the event. Natalie wants you as a bridesmaid. A bridesmaid. The absurdity almost made me laugh. She can't be serious. She's extending an olive branch. The least you could do is meet her halfway. I escaped to the bathroom while he paid, splashing cold water on my face and trying to calm my racing heart. In the mirror, I looked pale and young, still the little sister, still powerless in the family dynamic. Still being asked to sacrifice my feelings to maintain the Mitchell family image. Back home that night, I had barely closed my apartment door when my phone rang with Mom's familiar ringtone. Your father called, she began without preamble. Sam, honey, I know you and Natalie have your issues, but holding on to this anger isn't healthy for you. Of course she'd take his side. Mom, she's never even properly apologized. People apologize in different ways, sweetheart. Asking you to be in her wedding is Natalie's way of making amends. It's her way of creating the perfect wedding photos, I countered. She doesn't care about fixing our relationship. Mom sighed, the sound heavy with practiced martyrdom. Forgiveness isn't about what the other person deserves, Sam. It's a gift you give yourself. Carrying this bitterness around is only hurting you. The platitude made me grit my teeth. Easy for her to say when she'd always prioritized Natalie's feelings over mine. Dad's threatening to cut my tuition if I don't go. A pause. Well, he feels strongly about family unity. Maybe this is an opportunity to heal old wounds. Translation, just give in as always. I was about to respond when my call waiting beeped. Natalie's name flashed on the screen. Mom, I have to go. Natalie's calling. Take it, honey. See? She's reaching out. I switched calls, bracing myself. Hello. Sam. Finally. Natalie's voice bubbled with excitement that sounded genuine only if you didn't know her well. Did you get my invitation? Isn't the venue just perfect? James wanted Tuscany, but I told him the Hamptons would be so much more convenient for everyone. No hello, no acknowledgement of our strained relationship. Classic Natalie, barreling forward as if sheer momentum could overcome any obstacle. I got it, I said flatly. Wonderful. So listen, I'm thinking pale blue for the bridesmaids. It'll look amazing with your coloring. The dresses are Vera Wang, Daddy's treat, of course. I nearly dropped the phone. Natalie, I haven't agreed to be a bridesmaid. Oh, a momentary pause. But you're coming to the wedding, right? Mom said Dad talked to you about it. The manipulation was so transparent it made my teeth hurt. He certainly did. Sam, her voice softened to that cajoling tone she used when trying to get her way. I really want you there. You're my only sister. It wouldn't feel right without you. It didn't seem to bother you whether things felt right when you were sneaking around with Kyle. A sharp intake of breath. Are you seriously still hung up on that? We were teenagers, Sam. And it's not like you and Kyle were going to get married. That's not the point, and you know it. The point is you're my sister, and I want you at my wedding. Her voice took on the edge it always did when she wasn't getting her way. Everyone's going to ask where you are if you don't come. Is that what you want? To create drama around my special day? The familiar guilt trip made my stomach clench. Always about appearances, always about how things looked to others rather than the actual harm done. I'll think about it, I managed, knowing I had no real choice with Dad's threat hanging over me. Perfect. I need your measurements for the dress by next week. Oh, and the bachelorette weekend is in Miami, April 15th. I've already booked your flight. Before I could protest, she rushed on about hair appointments and shoe requirements, her words washing over me in a wave of wedding minutiae that left me dizzy and overwhelmed. By the time I hung up, the anxiety was a physical presence in my chest, a tight band squeezing my lungs. I was trapped in a perfect Mitchell family setup: attend the wedding and betray my own feelings, or stand my ground and potentially derail my entire future. Some choice. The moment I hung up with Natalie, I slid down against my apartment door until I hit the floor, knees pulled to my chest like a child hiding from monsters. But these monsters wore designer clothes and wielded financial threats instead of claws. Sam? That you? Ashley's voice called from the kitchen. My roommate of 2 years appeared in the hallway, spoon in hand, concern immediately replacing her usual smile. Holy shit, what happened? You look like you've seen a ghost. I couldn't even form words, just handed her my phone with the text from my father that had arrived while I was on the call with Natalie. I expect your RSVP by Friday. The tuition payment deadline is the following Monday. Your choice. Ashley read it, her expression darkening. Are you fucking kidding me? He's blackmailing you over a wedding invitation. She pulled me up and guided me to our worn couch, disappearing briefly before returning with a glass of wine. Drink. Then talk. I gulped the cheap Merlot gratefully and spilled the whole sordid story. The dinner ultimatum, Mom's enabling response, Natalie's presumptuous bridesmaid plans. That's so messed up, Ashley shook her head, refilling my glass. They're acting like your feelings are just some inconvenient obstacle to their perfect family portrait. Welcome to my entire life. The wine was loosening the knot in my chest slightly. I don't know what to do, Ash. I can't afford to lose that tuition payment, but the thought of standing beside Natalie in some poofy dress, pretending we're close. I might actually be sick during the ceremony. Could you fake illness last minute? Dad would see right through it. Besides, he specified I need to be polite and engaged throughout the whole weekend. I groaned, leaning back against the cushions. 3 days of Mitchell family theater, with me as the reluctant supporting actress. Ashley's outrage on my behalf was both comforting and clarifying. Having grown up in a genuinely supportive family, she found my parents' behavior appalling in ways I'd been conditioned to accept as normal. This is emotional extortion, she declared. And the fact that neither of them acknowledges how Natalie hurt you just makes it worse. My phone buzzed again. Daniel calling. My boyfriend of 8 months had become another pillar of support in my life, his steady presence a balm to my family-inflicted wounds. "Hey," his warm voice came through the speaker. I'd put him on speakerphone so Ashley could hear. "Just checking if we're still on for dinner tomorrow?" "Yeah, but fair warning, I'm bringing family drama to the table." I explained the situation while he listened patiently. Daniel was in his first year of law school and approached problems with a methodical thoughtfulness I'd come to rely on. "They're using financial leverage to force your compliance," he said finally. "It's manipulative, but unfortunately effective." "So you think I should just give in?" I couldn't keep the disappointment from my voice. "I think you should assess the real-world consequences of both options," he replied carefully. "Standing your ground has significant merit on principle, but potentially serious practical implications. The practical implications being I'd be screwed financially. Potentially, yes. But there might be alternatives we haven't explored yet." We warmed something in me, the reminder that I wasn't facing this alone anymore. After we hung up, Ashley squeezed my shoulder. "Whatever you decide, I've got your back. And hey, if you do go to this wedding, we'll prepare you so thoroughly you'll be emotionally bulletproof." The next day, I met with Josephine Reyes, my academic advisor, hoping for a miracle solution. Her office was cluttered with student artwork and scholarship information, the walls papered with exhibition announcements. "Last-minute financial aid for your final semester," she frowned, typing rapidly on her computer. "It's not impossible, but it's challenging, Samantha. Most scholarships have deadlines that have already passed. What about emergency loans? You could apply, but without a cosigner." She gave me a sympathetic look. "Private loans are possible, but the interest rates would be substantial. And there's processing time to consider. If you need the payment by next week, we'd be cutting it extremely close." The numbers she showed me made my heart sink. Even if I could secure emergency funding, I'd be starting my post-graduation life with significantly more debt than I'd planned for. And the deadline pressure created a real risk of administrative delays that could force me to withdraw for the semester. "What about taking a semester off?" I asked, the words painful to voice. "You could," she acknowledged. "Your academic standing is excellent. But it would mean missing the senior showcase, which is a significant professional opportunity. Many gallery representatives attend specifically to scout new talent." I left her office with a folder full of loan applications and a growing sense of being cornered. The practical path was painfully clear, even as my pride and sense of self-respect rebelled against it. That afternoon, I sought refuge in the studio space I shared with 3 other senior art students. The familiar smell of paint and clay usually centered me, but today even my art couldn't fully distract from the churning anxiety. "You're attacking that canvas like it personally offended you," observed Professor Marcus, pausing behind me. In his 60s with wild gray hair and paint-splattered clothes, he'd been my mentor since freshman year. I stepped back, realizing I'd been applying color with such force I'd nearly torn through the surface. "Sorry. Distracted today. Art feeds on emotion," he shrugged. "But I've never seen this particular shade of anger from you before. Want to talk about it?" Something about his matter-of-fact acceptance of my feelings broke through my defenses. I found myself explaining the whole situation while he listened thoughtfully, nodding occasionally. "Family," he finally said, "is both our greatest wound and our greatest teacher." "That sounds like a fortune cookie, Professor." He laughed, the sound echoing in the high-ceiling studio. "Perhaps. But consider this. What if you attend not as a victim or a reluctant participant, but as an observer? An anthropologist studying the curious rituals of the Mitchell tribe." "I'm not sure I follow." "Distance, Samantha. Emotional distance. You're an artist. You observe, you process, you transform. What if this wedding becomes material rather than trauma?" The perspective shift felt like cool water on a burn. "You mean use the experience rather than just enduring it?" "Precisely." He gestured to my canvas. "Your best work has always come from processing your complicated feelings about your family. Perhaps this is unwanted inspiration, but inspiration nonetheless." Later that night, Daniel came over with takeout and his laptop. "I've been researching options," he said, spreading containers of Thai food across my small dining table. And legally, your father isn't obligated to pay your tuition, regardless of previous promises." He squeezed my hand. But I also looked into emergency student loans as a backup. If he follows through on his threat, we could scramble to gather funding. It wouldn't be ideal, but you wouldn't have to drop out. Ashley joined us, bringing plates and her characteristic bluntness. So what's the verdict? Are you giving in to Daddy Dearest's demands? I pushed noodles around my plate, the decision settling heavily in my chest. I think I have to. The practical consequences of refusing are too severe right now. But I'm not going to pretend everything's fine either. Boundaries, Daniel nodded. You can attend without surrendering your self-respect. Exactly. I'll go to the damn wedding, but on my terms. I felt a flicker of resolve strengthening. I won't be a bridesmaid. I'll attend as a guest, nothing more. And we'll help you prepare, Ashley added. We'll role-play every possible interaction so you're ready with responses that protect your peace. Plus, Daniel added with a small smile, I happen to look exceptional in a suit if you need a buffer date. For the first time since the invitation arrived, I felt something loosen in my chest, not acceptance exactly, but a strategy forming. I wouldn't be walking into the lion's den alone or unprepared. That night, the nightmares came anyway, dreams where I stood frozen at Natalie's wedding while everyone stared, my dress suddenly transparent, my father's disappointed face looming above the crowd. I woke gasping at 3 a.m., heart pounding. The anxiety attacks weren't new. They'd started after the Kyle incident and resurged during particularly stressful family interactions. But tonight's felt especially intense, my body physically rejecting the choice my mind had made. As dawn broke, I sat at my small desk and wrote out exactly what I needed to protect my mental health through this ordeal. Boundaries about questions I wouldn't answer, time limits for family interactions, exit strategies for overwhelming moments. The list became my shield, a concrete plan rather than swirling fears. I texted my father a carefully worded response. I will attend the wedding as a guest, not as a bridesmaid. Those are my terms. Then I turned off my phone, unable to face his reply just yet. The following week was a blur of preparations, both practical and psychological. Ashley helped me find a dress that made me feel confident rather than diminished. Daniel practiced responses with me for predictable family comments. Professor Marcus suggested I bring a small sketchbook as both emotional outlet and protective barrier. When things get overwhelming, step back and draw, he advised. It gives you purpose and presence without requiring constant social engagement. I created a small mixed media piece as a talisman, layers of paper, paint, and tiny fragments of mirror forming a complex pattern that represented strength through fragmentation. Small enough to fit in my purse, it would remind me that broken pieces could create something beautiful and resilient. 3 days before departure, Dad called to confirm my attendance with characteristic briskness. Your RSVP was noted. The tuition payment has been processed. His tone conveyed he considered the matter resolved, all unpleasantness behind us. I meant what I said, Dad. I'm attending as a guest only, not standing in the wedding party. A pause. Natalie will be disappointed. Natalie will survive. I kept my voice steady. Those are my boundaries. Fine. The clipped response held familiar disapproval. But I expect you to be pleasant and engaged throughout the weekend. No sulking in corners or making scenes. I'll be civil. That's all I can promise. After hanging up, I experienced a strange mixture of dread and determination. The decision was made, the stage set. Now I just had to survive the performance without losing myself in the process. The night before my flight, I sat on my bed surrounded by carefully chosen outfits and emergency self-care items. Ashley brought me chamomile tea and found me staring at the wall. Second thoughts? She asked gently. No, just. I struggled to articulate the complex emotions, wondering when I'll stop feeling like that intimidated little girl around them. When I'll finally feel like they're equal. Maybe this weekend, she suggested. Standing your ground, even while compromising, is pretty damn adult. I nodded, trying to believe it. But as I packed my emotional armor alongside carefully selected clothes, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was heading into a battle I'd been losing my entire life. The 2 weeks between my reluctant RSVP and the wedding weekend passed in a blur of finals and preparation. With each day that brought me closer to the Hamptons showdown, my anxiety ratcheted higher. I threw myself into end-of-semester projects as distraction, often working in the studio until Ashley texted to make sure I was still alive. "You can't avoid this by drowning in acrylics," she pointed out one evening after finding me still painting at midnight. "Come on, wedding prep time. We made a list, remember?" She was right. We had indeed created a comprehensive survival strategy that I'd been procrastinating on implementing. With a sigh, I washed my brushes and followed her back to our apartment where she'd laid out several dresses on our couch. Option 1. The sophisticated revenge dress. She held up a sleek black number that hugged curves I usually kept hidden under paint-splattered jeans. Says, "I'm successful and confident without trying too hard." "Isn't black inappropriate for a wedding?" I asked, though I was drawn to the simple elegance of the design. "This isn't about appropriate, Sam. This is psychological warfare." But she moved on to the next option anyway. Choice 2. Unexpected color statement. No one will expect you in coral, and it actually looks amazing with your complexion. The coral dress was beautiful, flowing silk with subtle beading that caught the light. It was also nothing like anything I'd ever worn before. "I'd feel like I'm in costume," I admitted. "Sometimes a costume gives you permission to play a different role," she countered, but set it aside when I shook my head. The third option was the winner. A deep teal blue dress with an asymmetrical neckline and architectural details that spoke to my artistic sensibilities while still being undeniably elegant. It wasn't trying too hard to impress, but no one could dismiss it as inappropriate either. "This one," I said immediately, holding it against me. "It feels like me, but elevated me." "Elevated you is exactly who needs to show up at this wedding," Ashley nodded approvingly. "Now, accessories that say, I'm too successful and interesting to care about your opinion of me." We spent the evening curating the perfect ensemble. Silver jewelry I'd bought from a fellow art student, comfortable but stylish shoes I could stand in for hours if necessary, and a small clutch just big enough for my essentials and the talisman artwork I'd created. "Don't forget your emotional emergency kit," Daniel reminded me the next day over coffee. He'd become invested in my wedding survival strategy, bringing a lawyer's thoroughness to the preparation. "What exactly goes in an emotional emergency kit?" I asked, amused despite my anxiety. "Things that ground you when you start feeling overwhelmed." He ticked items off on his fingers. "A sensory distraction, like that lavender oil you use when you're stressed. A physical reminder of your support system, maybe a photo of us or something that represents your life outside your family. And an exit strategy for any conversation that becomes too much." "Exit strategy?" "Pre-planned excuses to remove yourself from situations," he explained. "Need to make an important call, check on your ride, find the restroom. Practice them so they sound natural." I nodded, adding these items to my mental checklist. "I should have hired you as my wedding strategist months ago." "I'm serious about this, Sam," he said, taking my hand. "Your family has a pattern of steamrolling your feelings. Having specific tools to maintain boundaries isn't overthinking, it's self-protection." That afternoon, I visited Professor Marcus during his office hours, seeking last-minute perspective before the wedding weekend. "How's the emotional armor coming along?" he asked, pushing aside a stack of final projects to give me his full attention. "I've got the outfit, the boundaries, the escape plans," I sighed. "But I still feel like I'm walking into a minefield." "Because you are," he said matter-of-factly. "Family events are always minefields when there's unresolved hurt. The trick isn't to expect no explosions, it's to survive them with your essential self intact." He reached for a small wooden box on his cluttered shelf, removing a smooth stone and placing it in my palm. It was cool to the touch, with bands of color running through it. "Kintsugi," he said, noting my examination of the gold lines threading through the stone. "The Japanese art of repairing broken pottery with gold. The philosophy behind it is that breakage and repair become part of the object's history, not something to hide, but something that makes it more beautiful, more unique." I turned the stone over, watching how the light caught the gold veins. "Your relationship with your family is broken in places," he continued. "This weekend won't fix those breaks. But perhaps it's an opportunity to acknowledge them honestly rather than pretending they don't exist. There's strength in that honesty." I slipped the stone into my pocket, oddly comforted by its solid weight. So I shouldn't aim for reconciliation? Aim for authenticity, he corrected gently. True reconciliation can't happen without it anyway. The evening before my departure, I finalized my packing while Ashley supervised. The dress hung ready on my closet door, shoes and accessories arranged neatly in my weekend bag. The practical preparation was complete, but my emotional readiness felt more tenuous. What if I can't do this? I asked suddenly, sitting heavily on my bed. What if I break down or lose my temper or just can't fake it convincingly enough? Ashley sat beside me, bumping my shoulder with hers. Then you'll handle it. You'll step outside, call me, and we'll figure it out together. Remember, you're not the same person you were in high school. You've built a life they know nothing about, with people who value the real you. I keep having to remind myself why I'm doing this, I admitted. It would be so satisfying to just refuse to go, consequences be damned. Write it down, she suggested. Seriously, make a list of exactly why you're attending. Not their reasons, your reasons. Keep it with you this weekend. Taking her advice, I pulled out my sketchbook and wrote my personal manifesto for the wedding weekend. 1. I am attending to secure my financial future and complete my degree on time. 2. I am not attending to reconcile with Natalie or please my parents. 3. My goal is to maintain my boundaries while remaining civil. 4. This is a temporary situation that serves my long-term goals. 5. My worth is not determined by their approval. Looking at the words in black and white helped solidify my resolve. This wasn't surrender. It was strategic compromise with clearly defined purposes and limits. My phone buzzed with a text from my father. Car service will pick you up at the Southampton station tomorrow at 2:15. Don't be late. No, looking forward to seeing you, or thanks for coming. Just logistics and implied criticism. Classic dad. I responded with a simple "I'll be there" and turned back to my packing, adding my sketchbook, the stone from Professor Marcus, and a small photo of me with Ashley and Daniel at a gallery opening last month. Visible proof of the life I'd built outside the Mitchell family shadow. That night, I called Daniel for one last pep talk before bed. You've got this, he assured me. Just remember, you're not going as the little sister anymore. You're going as Samantha Mitchell, almost graduated artist, woman with her own life and values. Samantha Mitchell, undercover anthropologist, I added, remembering Professor Marcus's framing. Exactly. Observe, document, and maintain your scientific distance from the curious native customs. I laughed, tension easing slightly. I wish you were coming with me. Next time, he promised. For now, just remember I'm a phone call away if you need reinforcements. After we hung up, I laid out my travel clothes for the morning and performed one final check of my suitcase. Everything was ready. I'd prepared as thoroughly as humanly possible for a weekend of Mitchell family theater. But as I tried to sleep, doubts crept in like shadows. Would I really be able to maintain my boundaries when faced with the full force of family expectation? Could I resist falling back into old patterns of acquiescence and silent resentment? Would Natalie's presence trigger all the hurt and betrayal I'd worked so hard to process? I tossed and turned, rehearsing responses to potential provocations, imagining worst-case scenarios, planning tactical retreats. Around 2 a.m., I gave up on sleep entirely and sat at my small desk, pulling out a fresh canvas. Without consciously planning it, I began creating a small mixed-media piece, layering paint, paper, and thin silver wire to create a protective circle. Within the circle, I placed symbols of my strength, a tiny paintbrush, a fragment of mirror, a scrap of paper with truth written in barely legible script. When finished, it was small enough to slip into my purse, a tangible reminder of the boundaries I was determined to maintain. My own personal talisman against family chaos. As dawn broke, I packed the artwork carefully between layers of tissue paper and finally fell into an exhausted sleep for the few hours remaining before my alarm. My dreams were surprisingly peaceful, not of wedding disasters, but of standing on a beach, waves washing away footprints in the sand, leaving the shore smooth and unmarked. I woke feeling strangely calm. The decision was made. The preparation complete. All that remained was to walk onto the stage and play my part. Not the role they'd written for me, but the one I'd carefully crafted for myself. Game on, I whispered to my reflection as I dressed for travel. The Mitchell family wedding weekend awaited, but this time, I wouldn't be arriving defenseless. The train from the city to Southampton felt like a passage between worlds. With each mile that carried me away from my apartment, my friends, my carefully constructed life, I felt my shoulders inching closer to my ears. The familiar tension headache began forming at my temples despite my best efforts at mindful breathing. Lush green landscapes gradually gave way to glimpses of blue water and sprawling estates. The passengers around me shifted from diverse city dwellers to an increasingly homogeneous crowd of weekenders in designer casual wear. By the time we pulled into Southampton Station, I felt like a spy in enemy territory despite my carefully selected outfit. The promised car service was waiting, a sleek black SUV with a driver holding a Mitchell wedding sign. 2 other passengers were already inside, distant cousins from my mother's side who greeted me with vague recognition. Samantha, right? Natalie's sister? The woman, Jennifer or Jessica, I couldn't remember which, gave me a once-over. We weren't sure you'd make it. Everyone's saying you're so busy with, what was it again? Graphic design. Fine arts, I corrected, forcing a smile. Painting and mixed media installation. How creative. Her husband nodded with the polite disinterest people usually reserve for children's art projects. Natalie mentioned you're at some art school? Good to pursue those interests before real life kicks in, isn't it? First interaction. First subtle dismissal. I took a deep breath and reminded myself of Professor Marcus's advice. Anthropological distance. Westbrook College of Arts is actually quite competitive, I said lightly. Many graduates go directly into gallery representation or museum work. They exchanged the kind of glance that said they'd discuss this later, privately. I turned to look out the window, mentally adding them to my minimize contact list for the weekend. The estate where the wedding would take place appeared around a curve in the road, a sprawling Hamptons mansion with manicured grounds stretching toward the ocean. Staff in crisp uniforms were arranging flowers along the driveway, and a massive tent was being erected on the lawn. No expense spared, naturally. As we pulled up to the entrance, I spotted my mother directing workers with the focused intensity of a field general. She broke into a wide smile when she saw me, rushing over as I exited the car. Samantha, you made it. She embraced me with a cloud of expensive perfume. Oh, you look lovely, darling. That color is wonderful on you. Are you hungry? Tired from the trip? The welcome bags are in the guest rooms. Natalie chose the most thoughtful local items. The rapid-fire questions and observations left no space for actual answers, a familiar tactic that kept interactions firmly on her preferred surface level. I'm fine, Mom. Just going to get settled before the welcome dinner. Of course, of course. She waved to a staff member. Michael will show you to your room. It's in the East Wing. We thought you'd appreciate the morning light for whatever artistic things you might want to do. At least she remembered I was an artist, even if she couldn't quite articulate interest in my actual work. The room was admittedly beautiful, airy and elegant with a balcony overlooking the ocean. The promised welcome bag sat on the bed, stuffed with local gourmet treats, miniature champagne, high-end toiletries, and a weekend itinerary printed on thick cardstock with gold lettering. I unpacked methodically, hanging the teal dress carefully in the closet. As I arranged my small arsenal of emotional support items on the nightstand, a knock came at the door. Dad stood there, Manhattan already in hand despite the early afternoon hour. You made it. He offered a stiff half-hug. Good. Your mother's been in a state worrying you'd back out. I said I'd be here. I stepped back, maintaining physical distance. I keep my promises. The implied criticism wasn't lost on him. His eyes narrowed slightly before he switched to a neutral expression. The Hendersons were asking about you. Lloyd's son Parker is single again, law practice in Manhattan, just made junior partner. You should make a point to speak with him at dinner. And there it was, not even 5 minutes before the matchmaking and career redirection began. I forced a non-committal smile. I'll keep that in mind. I need to freshen up before dinner. Cocktails at 6, Dinner at 7. Business casual. He delivered this information like mission parameters before retreating down the hallway. Alone again, I sank onto the bed and texted Ashley, made it. Already being match-made with lawyer son. Send reinforcements. Her response came immediately. Deploy diversion tactics. Mention your thriving artist boyfriend. Send pics of fancy prison. I smiled, her message achieving its intended effect of lightening my mood. After a quick shower, I dressed in the outfit we'd selected for tonight, black pants and a silk blouse in a vibrant pattern I'd designed myself. Professional enough to pass muster, but distinctly artistic. Armor, as Ashley called it. The cocktail hour was already in full swing when I made my way to the terrace. At least 50 guests mingled against the backdrop of the Atlantic Ocean, the setting sun casting everyone in flattering golden light. I recognized faces from childhood holidays and family reunions, plus what I assumed were James's family and friends, distinguishable by their slight discomfort around my mother's effusive greetings. I made it 30 seconds before the first mention of Natalie. There's the other Mitchell daughter. An elderly great-aunt whose name escaped me clasped my hands. We've been hearing all about Natalie's big promotion. Vice President of Marketing at 30. Extraordinary. And you're still in school, is that right? How nice for you to have the luxury of finding yourself. I extricated my hands gently. I'm completing my BFA. Actually, my work was recently selected for the Emerging Artists Showcase at the Westbrook Gallery. How lovely, she patted my arm. Creative hobbies are so important for young people. Now, have you met James's cousin Thomas? He's in banking. After 3 more similar conversations, I retreated to the edge of the terrace, glass of wine in hand, observing the social dynamics like the anthropologist Professor Marcus had suggested I become. The familiar Mitchell orbit was visible even here, my parents at the center of separate conversational groups, Natalie and James moving between circles like minor royalty greeting subjects. I hadn't seen my sister yet, but her laugh carried across the terrace, that perfect, practiced sound that somehow always managed to draw attention without seeming to try. I braced myself, knowing our first interaction would set the tone for the weekend. When it came, it was exactly the performance I'd expected. Natalie spotted me from across the terrace and let out a delighted squeal that turned heads. She rushed over in a swirl of designer perfume and blonde highlights, pulling me into an embrace I couldn't avoid without creating a scene. Sam, you made it. She held me at arm's length, examining me with wide eyes. Look at you, so artistic and chic. James, come meet my baby sister. James Wilson was exactly what I'd expected, tall, conventionally handsome, with the confident demeanor of someone whose path had always been smoothly paved. But his handshake was firm and his smile seemed genuine when he said, "Natalie's told me so much about you. I'm looking forward to seeing your artwork sometime. Nat says you're incredibly talented." I blinked in surprise. Natalie had described my work as talented? That didn't align with her usual dismissive references to my hobby. The gallery showing last month was quite impressive, she added, as if reading my thoughts. Mom showed me the program. The reviewers' comments were stellar. The compliment felt like finding a diamond in a coal mine, unexpected and suspiciously out of place. Was this part of the weekend performance? Or a genuine attempt at connection? Before I could respond, we were interrupted by James's parents, eager to discuss some detail about tomorrow's ceremony. Natalie squeezed my arm before turning away. We'll catch up properly later, okay? So glad you're here, Sammy. The childhood nickname hit like a time machine, momentarily disorienting me. No one had called me Sammy in years, least of all Natalie, who had declared the nickname childish when I turned 12. I retreated to a quiet corner, trying to process the interaction. Something felt off about Natalie's enthusiasm, too polished, too perfect, like everything else about this weekend. My suspicions deepened during dinner, where I found myself seated between Parker the lawyer and an elderly relative of James who was hard of hearing. Strategic placement to keep me occupied and away from any meaningful conversation with other guests. Throughout the elaborate 5-course meal, I maintained my polite smile while deflecting Parker's increasingly direct questions about my career plans after this art school phase. Each time Natalie caught my eye from the head table, she'd give an encouraging smile or little wave, as if we shared some special sisterly bond. The performance was flawless. To anyone watching, we were the picture of familial harmony. But the disconnect between appearance and reality made me feel increasingly untethered, like I was playing a role in someone else's play without having seen the script. After dinner came speeches, James's father offering heartfelt words about welcoming Natalie to their family, my father responding with polished anecdotes about Natalie's childhood achievements. He mentioned me exactly once, noting that both our daughters have always pursued their passions, though in very different directions. The subtle comparison hung in the air, understood by anyone who knew the Mitchell family dynamic. Natalie pursued passions that led to success. I pursued passions that led elsewhere. By the time I escaped to my room that night, exhaustion pressed on me like a physical weight. I texted Daniel a brief update before falling into restless sleep, dreaming of endless dinner tables where I couldn't find my assigned seat. The next morning brought the spa and relaxation day scheduled for female wedding guests. Despite not being a bridesmaid, I'd been included in the invitation, another of Natalie's superficially inclusive gestures. I debated skipping it entirely, but decided that hiding in my room would only generate more attention and questions. The hotel spa had been reserved exclusively for the wedding party. When I arrived, Natalie's friends, a collection of sorority sisters and work colleagues, were already sipping champagne in plush robes. Natalie herself sat in the center, glowing with pre-wedding radiance. "Sam," she waved me over. "I saved you a spot. Massage and facial, right? I remembered you hate pedicures." Again, that unsettling accuracy about my preferences. When had Natalie ever paid attention to such details? During the massage, I managed to relax slightly, the knots of tension in my shoulders reluctantly yielding to skilled hands. But the facial that followed placed me directly beside Natalie, our treatment beds close enough for conversation while estheticians worked on our skin. "I'm so glad you came this weekend," she said quietly, eyes closed as a cucumber-scented mask was applied. "I wasn't sure you would. Dad didn't leave me much choice," I replied before I could filter myself. A pause. "I know. Mom told me about his encouragement tactics." She sighed softly. "I didn't ask him to do that, Sam. That was pure Howard Mitchell." The use of our father's full name, something we'd done as teenagers when complaining about his strictness, created another moment of disorienting familiarity. "Would you have come otherwise?" she asked, vulnerability creeping into her voice. I considered lying, considered softening the truth. But the weekend already contained enough performance without adding my own. "Probably not," I admitted. "We haven't exactly been close, Natalie." "I know." She was quiet for so long I thought the conversation had ended. "Then, I've been thinking about that a lot lately. About Kyle and everything that happened." My body tensed despite the relaxing environment. We had never, not once in all these years, directly discussed the betrayal that shattered our relationship. I'd assumed we never would. "This isn't the place," I said firmly. "You're right. I'm sorry." She reached across the small gap between our beds, her hand finding mine in an echo of childhood comfort that felt both foreign and familiar. "Later." I didn't answer, but I didn't pull my hand away either. The afternoon brought the wedding rehearsal and subsequent dinner. Standing at the back of the picturesque garden where tomorrow's ceremony would take place, I watched Natalie practice her walk down the aisle on our father's arm. She was radiant, her happiness seemingly genuine as she gazed at James waiting at the improvised altar. A strange ache formed in my chest, not jealousy exactly, but a sense of loss for the sisterly bond we might have had in another version of our lives. In that alternate reality, I might have been standing with the bridesmaids, sharing meaningful glances during the ceremony, helping with last-minute details. The rehearsal dinner was held under the stars, lanterns illuminating long tables set on the lawn. I'd been placed at the family table this time, impossible to avoid with the smaller guest list. Mom filled silences with wedding details while Dad discussed business with James's father. I focused on my plate, limiting responses to nodded agreement or brief answers. As dessert was served, my father clinked his glass for attention. The table quieted as he stood, bourbon in hand, expression uncharacteristically emotional. "I'd like to propose a toast," he began. "To my daughters, both of them." My head snapped up in surprise. "Natalie," he continued, "tomorrow you'll embark on a new chapter that makes your mother and me immensely proud. Your drive and determination have brought you success in everything you've pursued." Standard Mitchell praise, delivered with practiced warmth. But then he turned toward me, his expression softening slightly. "And Samantha, whose artistic vision and independent spirit continually remind us that success takes many forms. Your perspective has always challenged conventional thinking, sometimes to your father's frustration." A small ripple of knowing laughter around the table. "But I've recently had the opportunity to see your work displayed at your college gallery, and I was impressed by the depth of emotion and technical skill it demonstrated." I froze, wine glass halfway to my lips. He gone to my gallery showing? Without telling me? "The Mitchell sisters couldn't be more different," he concluded, raising his glass higher, "but tomorrow, seeing them together reminds us all of the bonds that endure beyond differences." To Natalie and James, and to family. Glasses clinked as I sat in stunned silence. Mom squeezed my hand under the table, a rare moment of understanding passing between us. After dinner, as guests began dispersing toward their rooms, Natalie caught up with me on the path back to the house. "Can we talk? Just for a few minutes?" The emotional exhaustion of the day left me without energy to refuse. I nodded, following her to a small garden alcove with a stone bench overlooking the darkened ocean. We sat in silence for a moment, the distant sound of waves filling the space between us. "I never properly apologized," she finally said, eyes fixed on the horizon. "About Kyle. About how I hurt you." The directness was so unexpected I couldn't immediately respond. "I was jealous of you," she continued when I didn't speak. "It sounds ridiculous, doesn't it? Golden child Natalie, jealous of her little sister." "Jealous of what?" I found my voice. "I was the family disappointment. You were free." She turned to face me, her expression stripped of its usual polish. "You always knew exactly who you were, Sam. You never cared about fitting into the mold Dad created. Your art, your perspective, your whole way of being, it was authentically you. And that justified betraying me?" The old anger flickered despite my attempts to maintain emotional distance. "No, nothing justified that." She looked down at her engagement ring, twisting it absently. "I was insecure and selfish. Kyle paid attention to me in a way that wasn't about my achievements or how I reflected on the family. And instead of recognizing that I needed to find my own authentic relationships, I took yours." The honesty of her response caught me off guard. This wasn't the practiced, perfect Natalie I'd expected. "Why no?" I asked. "After all these years, why have this conversation the night before your wedding?" "Because I realized I don't want to keep living a life based on appearances." Her voice caught slightly. "All this," she gestured toward the estate, "the elaborate wedding preparations, it's beautiful and James is wonderful, but I've been going through the motions of what a Mitchell success story should look like. And James knows this? We've talked about it. He's actually the one who encouraged me to try to make things right with you. He said family rifts leave scars that never quite heal." She hesitated. "I don't expect forgiveness, Sam. I just wanted you to know that I see now how wrong I was, and I'm truly sorry." The apology hung between us, unexpectedly weightier than the years of silence had been. I didn't know what to do with this version of Natalie, vulnerable, reflective, apparently sincere. "I can't just forget what happened," I said finally. "I know. But..." I searched for words that felt true without being cruel. "I appreciate you saying this. It matters that you acknowledge it." She nodded, a small smile forming. "Maybe someday we could try again? Not as best friends or anything, just sisters who don't actively avoid each other." The question held none of her usual confidence, just genuine uncertainty. Maybe I allowed. One step at a time. We sat in surprisingly comfortable silence for several minutes before she stood. "I should get some sleep. Big day tomorrow." "Natalie," I called as she turned to leave. "I hope you'll be happy. Genuinely." Her smile in response was the most authentic expression I'd seen from her in years. Thanks, Sammy. That means a lot. I remained on the bench long after she left, processing the unexpected turn the evening had taken. The conversation hadn't magically healed our relationship, but it had shifted something fundamental in how I viewed our past and possible future. When I finally returned to my room, I found myself sketching Natalie's face, not the perfect, polished version she presented to the world, but the vulnerable, uncertain woman from our conversation. For the first time in years, I drew my sister as a complex human rather than the two-dimensional villain she'd become in my narrative. The wedding day dawned clear and perfect, obviously. Natalie wouldn't have allowed anything less. I dressed carefully in my teal dress, applied makeup that highlighted rather than masked my features, and tucked my talisman artwork into my clutch. The ceremony itself was undeniably beautiful. Watching Natalie walk down the aisle, I felt a surprising lack of resentment. Her Joe. During the reception, I circulated among guests with more ease than I'd expected, deflecting the usual questions about my hobby and future plans with practiced responses. When the inevitable comparisons to Natalie arose, I found they stung less than before, perhaps because I no longer felt I was being measured against her version of success, but against my own. Dad found me during the cocktail hour, 2 glasses of champagne in hand. He offered one silently, and we stood watching the celebration unfold. "Your speech last night," I finally said. "You went to my gallery showing?" He nodded, a hint of discomfort in his posture. "Last month. Professor Marcus invited me." "Marcus invited you?" This was news to me. He thought I should see your work in proper context. Professional setting, critical reception. He cleared his throat. He was right. I've been narrow-minded about your choices, Samantha. The admission, however begrudging, was more than I'd expected from Howard Mitchell. Thank you for going, I managed. Your final tuition payment isn't conditional on this weekend, he added abruptly. I shouldn't have implied that. It was manipulative. I nearly choked on my champagne. That's surprisingly self-aware, Dad. A flash of the old irritation crossed his face before settling into something like resigned amusement. I'm capable of growth, despite evidence to the contrary. He raised his glass slightly. To your graduation. I'll be there, if you'll have me. I'll send you the details, I replied, the closest I could come to acceptance in the moment. As the reception continued into evening, I found myself unexpectedly enjoying certain moments, dancing with elderly relatives who remembered me as a child, watching James's college friends perform an elaborate choreographed tribute, even catching the subtle looks of love between my parents despite their divorce. When Natalie tossed her bouquet, I deliberately stood at the back of the group. But somehow, improbably, the flowers arced directly toward me. Instinct made me catch them before I could step aside. Natalie's delighted laughter rang out. Look at that. The artist has good reflexes. Rather than the embarrassment I might have expected, I found myself laughing too, at the absurdity, at the perfect rom-com moment in this imperfect family story, at the unexpected ways life refused to follow the scripts we wrote for it. As the night wound down and guests began departing, I found myself on the terrace, gazing at the ocean under a canopy of stars. The weekend had been nothing like I'd expected, neither the perfect nightmare I'd feared nor the false reconciliation I'd cynically anticipated. Instead, it had been messier, more authentic, with moments of genuine connection interspersed with old patterns and lingering hurts. Like family itself, complicated, imperfect, but somehow enduring. I pulled out my phone to text Ashley, survived. Actually had moments that didn't suck. Heading home tomorrow with dignity intact and surprisingly minimal emotional scarring. Her response came immediately, plot twist. Do we still hate Natalie or nah? I smiled, considering the question. Complicated, I typed back. We'll explain over wine when I'm home. Prepare for saga. Some stories couldn't be summarized in text messages. Some journeys needed to be shared face to face, with all their contradictions and unexpected turns intact. And for the first time in years, I felt I had a story about my family that wasn't just about pain, but about the messy, imperfect possibility of growth. The train ride back to the city felt entirely different from the journey out. Where tension had knotted my shoulders on the way to Southampton, I now felt a strange lightness, not exactly peace, but something adjacent to it. The weekend that I dreaded for weeks had unfolded in ways I never could have predicted. Ashley was waiting at my apartment with wine already poured and curiosity practically radiating from her. "Spill everything," she demanded the moment I walked through the door. "Your texts were cryptic as hell. Did aliens replace your family with semi-decent replicas?" I dropped my weekend bag and collapsed onto our couch, accepting the offered glass gratefully. It was complex. Natalie actually apologized for the Kyle thing. Like, genuinely apologized. Ashley's eyebrows shot up. No way. Golden's sister acknowledged wrongdoing? Was Mercury in retrograde or something? I know, I'm still processing it myself. I kicked off my shoes and tucked my feet under me. And Dad admitted he was wrong to threaten my tuition. He even said he went to my gallery showing last month. Now I know you're making this up. Ashley refilled my glass. Howard's success means business school. Mitchell voluntarily attended an art exhibition. Apparently Professor Marcus invited him. I shook my head, still surprised by this revelation. Marcus never mentioned it to me. Sneaky professor, Ashley nodded approvingly. So, are you and Natalie besties now? Should I be worried about being replaced as your roommate? I laughed. Hardly. One honest conversation doesn't erase years of damage. But it was a start, maybe. We left things open to possibly developing a different kind of relationship in the future. For the next hour, I recounted the weekend in detail, the unexpected moments of connection, the familiar patterns that still emerged, the complex emotions I'd navigated throughout. Ashley listened attentively, asking clarifying questions and offering occasional commentary. "It sounds like you handled it perfectly," she concluded. "Maintain boundaries while still being open to genuine moments. Very mature of you, Mitchell." I had good coaching, I acknowledged with a smile. "You and Daniel deserve co-MVP status for wedding survival strategy." Speaking of Daniel, he came over the following evening for a proper debrief. His analytical mind approached my family revelations with thoughtful consideration. "It's interesting that this breakthrough happened around a wedding," he observed as we cooked dinner together in my small kitchen. "Milestone events often create space for relationship recalibration." "Is that the legal perspective?" I teased, bumping his hip with mine as I reached for the salt. "More like the human one." He smiled, stirring the pasta sauce. "People rarely change in the ways or time frames we want them to. But that doesn't mean they don't change at all." That thought stayed with me as I returned to campus for my final semester. The tuition payment had been processed as promised, without further comment or conditions from my father. My focus shifted fully to my senior exhibition, the culminating project that would showcase my artistic development and potentially open doors to gallery representation after graduation. Professor Marcus caught me after class one day in early September. "So," he said casually, "how was the wedding?" "You knew my father would be at the gallery showing," I replied, neither accusation nor gratitude in my tone, just acknowledgement. He shrugged, unapologetic. Parents sometimes need context to understand their children's worlds. Especially parents like Howard Mitchell. "He might have appreciated some warning," I pointed out. "Would you have wanted him there if you'd known in advance?" The question gave me pause. "Probably not," I admitted. "Exactly." Marcus smiled. "Sometimes the most important conversations happen because we don't have time to put our defensive walls in place first." Whether I agreed with his methods or not, I couldn't argue with the results. The conversation with my father, however brief, had shifted something in our relationship. The following week, he emailed me asking about my exhibition plans, the first time he'd ever expressed interest in my artistic process without prompting. I responded with more detail than necessary, half expecting no reply. But he wrote back with several thoughtful questions about my concept and timeline. The exchange wasn't exactly warm, but it was more engaged than any conversation we'd had about my art in years. Inspired by the complex emotions from the wedding weekend, I began work on a new series for my exhibition. I called it Golden Cages, mixed media pieces exploring family dynamics, expectations, and the complex interplay between love and constraint. Each piece incorporated elements of confinement juxtaposed with moments of freedom and authenticity, gilded frames containing fragmented mirrors, delicate wire structures both protecting and imprisoning small painted figures, layers of transparency and opacity representing the visible and hidden aspects of family relationships. Professor Marcus was intrigued by the concept. "This is more nuanced than your previous work," he noted during a critique session. "I see ambivalence here rather than just anger." "That's growth, Samantha." He was right. Where my earlier pieces about family had burned with resentment and pain, these new works acknowledged the complexity of human bonds, how the same relationships that wound us can also shape our strongest qualities, how love and hurt often occupy the same spaces. As the semester progressed, I received a tentative text from Natalie. "Saw Mom last weekend. She mentioned your senior exhibition. When is it exactly? James and I might be in the city that week." I stared at the message for a long time before responding. "April 15th, 7 to 9 p.m. at the Westbrook Gallery. It's open to the public." After a moment's hesitation, I added, "You'd be welcome to come." Her reply was immediate, "We'll be there." I showed the exchange to Ashley, who raised an eyebrow. "Are you okay with that? Natalie at your artistic debut." "I think so," I said, surprising myself with the realization. My work isn't about impressing them anymore. It's about expressing my truth. Whether they understand it or not is secondary. This new perspective infused my creative process with unexpected freedom. No longer creating in reaction to family expectations or in defiance of them, I found myself making art that spoke to universal human experiences of belonging, autonomy, and the search for authentic connection. When my mother called to discuss Thanksgiving plans, I navigated the conversation with newfound ease. "I can come for dinner, but I'll need to leave early. I have studio time scheduled for Friday morning." "Of course, honey," she replied, and remarkably, didn't push for me to stay longer or criticize my priorities. Instead, she asked, "Would you like to bring Daniel? We'd love to meet him." The acknowledgement of my relationship, which I'd mentioned months ago without much response, caught me off guard. "I'll ask him," I managed. "Thank you for the invitation." These small shifts continued throughout the fall, not dramatic reconciliations or perfect understanding, but incremental movements toward mutual respect. Dad sent occasional articles about successful artists or gallery openings he thought might interest me. Mom made efforts to ask specific questions about my work rather than vague inquiries about that art thing. Even Natalie maintained sporadic contact, our text exchanges brief, but increasingly genuine. When she sent a photo of her honeymoon in Greece, I responded with actual interest rather than performative politeness. When I shared news about a small piece I'd sold at a student showcase, her congratulations seemed sincere. By the time my final semester began in January, the Mitchell family dynamics had evolved into something I wouldn't have recognized a year earlier. The old patterns weren't erased. Dad still occasionally made comments about practical career paths. Mom still compared me to Natalie in subtle ways, but the sharp edges had softened. More importantly, my responses to these triggers had changed. "You're not reacting from the wounded place anymore," Daniel observed one evening as I recounted a phone call with my father that would have sent me spiraling months earlier. "You're engaging from your center rather than your scars." The insight resonated deeply. The wedding weekend, for all its emotional complications, had marked a turning point. Not because my family had suddenly become perfect, but because I had finally stepped fully into my own identity apart from them. As my senior exhibition approached, my anxiety shifted from family-related stress to the normal nervousness of any artist preparing to present their work to the world. The Golden Cages series had expanded to include interactive elements, inviting viewers to physically engage with concepts of perspective and reflection. My academic advisor, Josephine, was particularly excited about the installation. "This work is gallery-ready, Samantha. I've invited several curators and gallery owners to the opening. Your technical skills have always been strong, but now there's a conceptual maturity that makes the work genuinely compelling." The night before the exhibition opening, Ashley helped me make final preparations in the gallery space. As we carefully adjusted lighting and placement, she said, "Remember when you were panicking about attending Natalie's wedding? Look how far you've come since then." From emotional blackmail to artistic breakthrough, I laughed. Not the journey I expected. "Life rarely follows the plot outline we create for it," she replied, stepping back to assess the display. "That's what makes it interesting." The exhibition opening exceeded all my expectations. The gallery buzzed with attendees, fellow students, professors, local artists, and several professional curators. My parents arrived early, Dad looking uncomfortably formal, but genuinely trying to engage with the artwork, Mom exclaiming over the impressive turnout. Natalie and James arrived halfway through the evening. I spotted them across the room, my sister elegant as always, but with a hesitancy in her posture I'd never associated with her. When our eyes met, she gave a small wave and a genuine smile. "Your sister's here," Daniel murmured beside me. "I know," I replied, feeling surprisingly calm. "It's okay." When we eventually made our way to each other, the greeting was awkward but not tense. "This is incredible, Sam," Natalie gestured to the exhibition. "I mean, I knew you were talented, but this is professional. Important." The compliment, delivered without qualifiers or comparisons, felt like a gift. "Thank you for coming. It means a lot." "Of course." She hesitated, then added, "I'm proud of you." "That probably sounds condescending, but I am. You've built something real here on your own terms." Those words, "on your own terms," captured precisely what made this achievement different from any recognition I'd received before. This wasn't success as defined by Mitchell family standards or societal expectations. This was my vision, my voice, finding its audience. Professor Marcus found me later, as the crowd began to thin. "Several gallery representatives asked for your contact information," he said with quiet satisfaction. "I told you authentic work finds its audience." "Thank you," I said, meaning it for more than just the information. "For everything. Artists have to find their true material," he replied. "For some, that means facing the very dynamics they've been running from. You did that, and look what emerged." The exhibition marked not just the culmination of my academic career, but the beginning of my professional one. 2 weeks later, I received an offer for a small solo show at a respected downtown gallery for the fall, along with an invitation to participate in a summer residency program for emerging artists. When I graduated in May, my family sat together in the audience: Mom, Dad, and somewhat surprisingly, Natalie and James. They cheered when my name was called, my father's voice unexpectedly loud among the applause. The family dinner afterward wasn't perfect. Old patterns emerged in subtle ways, Mom fussing over Natalie's recent promotion, Dad asking pointed questions about my financial plans now that graduation had arrived. But the difference was in how I received these moments, not as wounds or confirmations of my lesser status, but simply as the imperfect expressions of flawed but well-meaning people. When Daniel and I moved into a small studio apartment the following month, my first place without roommates, I hung a single piece from the Golden Cages series on the wall opposite our bed. A reminder not of past pain but of how transformation can emerge from the very relationships that once felt most constraining. Ashley helped with the move, her graduation gift to me a set of professional brushes I'd been coveting for months. To new beginnings, she toasted when we collapsed exhausted on our second-hand couch that evening. And to unlikely catalysts, I added, thinking of how my father's wedding ultimatum had inadvertently sparked so much growth. That night, lying beside Daniel in our new home, I reflected on the journey of the past year. From being manipulated into attending a dreaded family event to finding my artistic voice and establishing healthier boundaries, the path had been neither straight nor simple. Family relationships remained works in progress. Natalie and I were building a cautious friendship based on who we were now rather than who we'd been as teenagers. Dad was learning to respect my choices even when he didn't fully understand them. Mom was making efforts to see me as an individual rather than in relation to my sister. None of it was perfect, but perfection had never been the goal. Authenticity was, both in my art and in my relationships. The wedding that I dreaded had become not an endpoint, but a turning point, the moment I began to see my family and myself with clearer, more compassionate eyes. As I drifted toward sleep, I thought about the advice Professor Marcus had given me months ago about attending the wedding as an observer rather than a victim. He'd been right. Changing my perspective had changed everything, not by erasing the past, but by allowing me to incorporate it into a more complete understanding of myself and my family. Some relationships were worth investing in, even when they were difficult. Others needed firm boundaries to protect my peace. The wisdom was in knowing the difference, and in recognizing that sometimes, unexpectedly, people could change and relationships could heal in ways you never anticipated. Thank you for staying with me through this story. If you've ever had to navigate complicated family dynamics or make peace with difficult relationships, I'd love to hear your experiences in the comments. How do you balance maintaining boundaries with leaving room for growth and change? Have you ever been surprised by healing in relationships you thought were permanently damaged? Don't forget to like this video if you found my journey relatable, and subscribe for more stories about navigating life's messy, beautiful complications. Remember that even the most difficult family situations can sometimes lead to unexpected growth, not because the challenges disappear, but because we develop the strength and wisdom to face them differently. Until next time, take care of your heart and remember that your worth isn't defined by anyone else's perception of you.